Welcome to Tell the Story, the podcast where we bring you the real and raw conversations about resilience, growth, and purpose after a life of service. I'm your host, Doug White, a veteran, retired first responder, and the author of Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward. On this podcast, we focus more than just the origin stories and challenges of service. We explore how veterans, first responders, and their families move forward and thrive. Through honest and thought-provoking discussions, we highlight resilience, perseverance, post-traumatic growth, and the opportunities that can be found in life's next chapter. This episode is proudly brought to you by Polestar Coffee, fueling the brave with the finest blends. Find them at polestarcoffee.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Every review helps us spread the word. Today, I'm honored once again to be sitting with my pal, Pete Palm. Pete, once again, has brought his notebook and his silly little multicolored pen. We're sitting down today at 22nd Street Coffee. Good morning, Pete. How are we doing today?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well today.
Good.
So a long pre-talk before we got started with this one today, but I think it's good. I think it'll make this better.
Yeah, the funny thing is there was actually no talk about this episode, and we've spoken for, good Lord, 2 hours about everything but this podcast. This is, we can call this unscripted, can't we?
Unscripted?
Yeah.
Aren't they all?
Well, yeah, between you and I, pretty much.
Yeah.
So what are we going to talk about today, then?
Hiding in plain sight. That's what we're going to talk about.
Come on, you brought
Your
me all the
book,
way out
brother,
here to
your
talk
book.
to me about my book. Well, I'm embarrassed. For those of you at home, and this isn't video, you can see my face is red, but not really. I kind of had a feeling this was coming. I'm sorry, I was distracted by the guy dragging his chair across the floor.
And speaking louder than necessary.
Yeah, talking about soy, latte, whatever.
You weren't aware that we were supposed to hear his conversation.
Yeah, no. I bet he CrossFits. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not changing a tire. We'll probably even open up a jar of pickles, unless he's going to do something with the pickles. I may have to take that out. Tyler, that was for you, because I'm sure you would giggle at that. So, Pete, what
would that
do we
be
have?
the first time you're going to get canceled for something?
Oh, no, dude. We've already established today that I don't need a job.
There you go.
Yeah, hey, by the way, I want to bring that up for those of you listening at home. I had well, I don't know, would you call it a job offer?
I'm pretty sure it was.
I
Yeah,
would say it's a hard recruitment.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so a
It
hard
wasn't a
recruitment.
complete offer, but I mean, it would have been there had you taken it forward.
Had it not been for my job blocker, Pete. So he decided he was going to be the ad hoc agent and tell them what I needed to get paid. And, of course, I backed it down a little bit. And they were like, yeah, okay. So,
Just out for your best interest
yeah, but it would have been cool.
for like half a second.
Yeah, but I know where their office is, so that's like a 40-minute commute without traffic.
Half a second
Okay.
would have been cool.
You saved me. But anyway, if I get canceled from the podcast that I don't need to do, or my book doesn't sell anymore, I guess I can go get some honest work and
There you go.
grow up and do
It's still
something
there.
in that realm. All right. Well, what are we going to talk about? I see you also have a problem with stickies.
I do.
Good. Pete, would you say this book is sticky worthy?
It's definitely sticky worthy.
Okay.
I mean, well, to me it is. I mean, you look at how many I've got in there. So.
Yeah, no.
And I guess we should. Actually, no. I don't want to go to my first sticky. I want to start with something else in the beginning here.
Go.
Because.
Do whatever, man. You're running the show today.
Nice. I love reading what Michelle wrote in here and added to the book. I think it's awesome, the relationship that you guys have, and you're a blessed guy, and you should better be thankful every day that you have a woman like Michelle in your life. Those of you that haven't read the book, when you finally read this book and get to it, and there's a piece in the end also that we'll get to that I also have stickied and tabbed and underlined here. I just love that. I can't emphasize enough how like relationships and your relationship with your family, your spouse, and then of course, as we've talked about, the faith relationship is going to carry us through all of these things. So it's so awesome what she wrote in the book, and I
Well,
can't wait for everybody to read that.
Let me clarify all the wonderful things you just said about that. I feel like I have to caution people and own my part of that. That's all Michelle. Okay, that despite my best efforts to be a shit and to be an isolated, unpresent human being for 25 years, it was Michelle, and she'll shake her head no when she hears this and be mad at me, but it was, and I've been clear about this, it was her faith, it was her strength, her devotion to us that carried this through. So let's I can't take any credit for that. I was a bystander. She was the one that picked up the slack and carried us through.
Be fair to yourself. It was never your intent to
No,
do that.
no, absolutely,
you never tried to do any of those
absolutely
things,
not.
so,
No, I just didn't know any better. But
right.
she, and you know, this, the preface that she wrote in the book, this was never supposed to be there. She believed in the book, believed in me and the mission, and knew that this was an important thing to do, and supported me the whole way. But she didn't want her voice to be attached to it yet, because she was still processing, as we still are, you know, in our own journeys, and everybody listening are still working on their own journeys. But you and I had a conversation just the night before she decided to do this, and that was when we had a mutual person we knew who died by suicide, and we were speaking on the back porch the next morning and just kind of processing that. And Michelle said, you know, I can't put myself in her position, because I don't know how it would feel that if I knew you were struggling the way that you did and I never did anything about it, and you carried through with what you had planned back on October 19th of 19. I don't know that I would ever forgive myself for that. She said, I feel that I have to write something in the book. And I said, absolutely. She says, but I'm not an author. And I just laughed and said, neither am I. Yeah, she sat down just that day, in fact, and her preface is unvarnished. It is not corrected. It has not been edited. What came out of Michelle, that is the draft. Those are her feelings, her words. And yeah, man, I think she nailed it beautifully. And I've heard that from multiple people, that she really added the depth and the value and the importance of why we should have this book. So I'm grateful to her for countless reasons. But yeah, she's going to be disappointed that we talked about her this much.
Last thing I'll say is, for many reasons, reading through that, it's something that get teared up, choked up a little bit reading that and getting to the end of it. So it's amazing, and you guys have an amazing relationship, and I'm proud of you, both of you.
Oh, we work on it every day, and thank you for that.
So going forward, I'm going to just point out here that I what I like about this is you didn't just sit down and just write your opinions. You know, you did that, of course, but you added in here a lot of research to it. You did your homework on it, and you have stuff that links back to exactly what's going on. You cite works by actual doctors, psychologists, and other people working in the field, and describe the things that are going on with people. And one of the first things I highlighted here was the post-traumatic stress injury, and then underlining this portion right here, that it is my opinion, and is becoming widely accepted, that post-traumatic stress is not a disorder, nor is it a mental health issue. It's an injury, a neurological issue. I think that's one of the most important things that we need to get across, and we've talked about this. We've talked about it in the resilience program that we had back at the office. It's some of the things that we've tried to get over and over and over. If you break your leg, you're not going to put some tape around it and just forget about it and say it's going to get better. You're going to go to the doctor. You're going to get that healed up. You're going to get it casted. You're going to get it fixed. You're going to go back, potentially do physical therapy with that, and you're going to go forward in your life and hopefully be stronger for doing that. When we finally start looking at the emotional injuries and mental health injuries that we suffer as a result of what we do for a living, and treat them as we would treat any other injury, that it's not wrong, it's not bad, it doesn't make us less of who we are, that we suffered that. It's no different, again, than a torn rotator cuff, a broken leg. So going through that is super important to make that point. And then talking in here on the next page, we talk about betrayal, loss of trust, and the moral injuries that come from that, and how those things can bring trauma just as much as exposure to dead bodies, violent aggression from somebody at work, and anything else that first responders might come across in their day-to-day activities. So again, pointing these things out is super important when people go in here and understand that we're not alone. You know? I think that's one of the big things. That's one of the things that you and I realized.
Yeah, the first conversation we had about this.
You know, you're not alone in any of this stuff. And then going through here, I'm going to get to my next tab. Well, you know what? I'm going to skip past this one, because I tabbed this and underlined this stuff when you started this vignette, and this is actually one that finishes up later in the book. So, you know, going back to this is going to go. My next one actually jumps up to fast forwarding here. We're already at chapter 3 here. This is one of the biggest problems that I see in our community, and it's something that's widespread, and we know so many people that have done it. It's the self-medicating. You got here, what I underlined is self-medicating was not the answer. There are no answers in bottles. I think all of us know that to be true, but it becomes such an easy outlet, especially when you're sitting in the house and it's late at night and you're not going to make that phone call. You don't want to make that phone call, because if you make that phone call to somebody, again, it's the thought that they're going to think less of you. And it's super easy. It's like the magic chair in Dr. Gilmartin's book. You can sit there, you can open that bottle. It's never going to say no to you. Never at all going to say no to you. It's gonna be there. It's going to be available at any time. It's never going to, in the moment, make you feel guilty. It's not gonna judge you or anything like that. You pour your glass and take a sip and momentarily feel better. And that's the hook and the draw. And too many guys and girls that are in the profession and dealing with rough things, they fall into that. And I mean, instead of me monologuing, you know, the second and third order effects of that, we all know too well. I mean, and you said that for a reason. So, you know, as your research showed, what were the second and third order effects of that self-medicating, like from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, well, you know, when you get to that point, you're not thinking very clearly anyway. And then when you decide to add a distraction to that, whether you're distracting yourself with, you know, you're self-medicating with gambling or booze or porn or pills or going off for 30-mile runs. I mean, whatever it is that's pulling you away from what it is that you need to deal with and distracting you, that's all it is. Now, we know booze, that's going to destroy your sleep. We all know that sleep is something that's critical for getting our brains and our bodies to heal. It flushes out the toxins, all of the things, and the research there is clear. But I think when we're not dealing with these things, we try to avoid and outrun, they're going to catch us. And those are just the addictions and the depressants and all that stuff. I think it just dulls us to whatever it is that we should be feeling. And I wanted to mention something, you know, a healthier outlet. And you said it, the bottle doesn't judge you. You know, the bottle's not going to say no, the bottle's always there. But I found that, and I learned this from reading bits and pieces of Odysseus and the Oar, written by Adam Magers. He talks about journaling, and that when you sit down with that blank piece of paper, you can have conversations with yourself minus the ego, because the piece of paper is not judging. The piece of paper is not going to say no. There's no feedback. You can be real with that. So I'm not an addiction counselor. I'm not a clinician or anything like that. But what I found more therapeutic was just to write and get it down. How do you know what you think until you see what you say? I heard that from Joe Byerly from The Green Notebook, his podcast and his show, and it's very clear that you're not going to work on things until you see how you truly feel about them. And you're not going to do that in the bottom of a bottle. You're not. It's not going to be there. You're going to keep avoiding, and it's going to catch you. And when it catches you, you're going to be tired. You're not going to be in your right frame of mind. You're not going to be thinking clearly. You're going to make decisions, poor decisions that you never would have made. So yeah, that.
I couldn't agree more. So it's interesting that there's another piece in this book that you put in here, because I remember this event unfolding. And at the time I was still in college, and I had just recently made the decision that my post-college employment, what I was going to seek for employment, was law enforcement. And so this event occurred around the same time. So I found it interesting that you put it in there and how it was juxtaposed to your career. So I'm just going to read a little piece, and then I want to get your feedback on what frame of mind I put you in, because I want to go into this a little bit. So this is May 19th, 1998, and as you say, on the eve of your first shift as a civilian law enforcement officer. So this story unfolds, and what ended up happening was, I'll just go down to the bottom here. The person of interest was taken into custody for questioning. During the transport by Detectives Bell and Childers, the subject was able to free his hands using a concealed handcuff key and wrestled away one of the detectives' firearms. He was able to kill both detectives and retrieve his SKS-style rifle from the trunk. Suspect fled on Interstate 75, and Florida Highway Patrol Trooper James Crook stopped him. Suspect fired on the trooper, killing him. Suspect barricaded himself in a gas station and eventually succumbed to the effects of the bullets. I'll stop there because as people read the book, they get all the other stuff in there. But this is the eve of your first shift as a civilian cop. So tell me how that made you feel, because I can think a lot of people would probably see an incident like that occur and unfold as they're about to go do this job and have the thought of like, hell no, I'm out now. So how did it affect you, and what were you thinking?
You know, I think a lot of people, and I'll try to bring this full circle here. I think a lot of people, when they hear stuff now about first responders saying, you know, people don't like us. They're talking trash about us. They don't like our professions. We have PTS and drinking problems, high divorce rates, high suicide rates. And then some asshole comes out and misses the context of every bit of it and says something stupid like, well, that's what they signed up for. You mentioned it when we were at Cozy Coffee Cafe, that we sign up knowing that we're going to have an adversarial relationship with bad guys. We're going to be stopping people from doing bad things to good people. We understand that those are the things that we're going to have to deal with. We don't sign up for organizational betrayal. We don't sign up for betrayal from the people that we try to protect. The sheep never bite the sheepdog, and to use what I believe is an absolutely worn out, ridiculous thing. But that doesn't happen. But our flock will turn on us in a heartbeat, and people always say that's what we signed up for. No, we signed up to be of service in our community and to our countries and a larger scope for anybody who's a veteran or still serving. We didn't sign up for the garbage that goes along with it. We understood, as Andy Stump says, there's a cost to doing this, and we are going to pay the price. So we understand that going into that, there are some things that are going to happen. All that said, when I watched that unfold almost live on the news, the play-by-play, I believe that my resolve was more steeled because of that. It made it very real to me that I wasn't going out to hang a piece of steel on my chest and, be the hero. This was a real thing, and my job is to save lives. I mean, the things that we do, sometimes we go to work, there are things that we're going to encounter that are unforgiving. And I think that day was a perfect example of that. Bad things are going to happen to good people, and it takes good people, armed good people, to ensure that those things don't happen. And I think it just reminded me what it was that I signed up for, and made it clear to me that although I didn't know it at the time, and I would discover over the course of 25 years that piece of stamped metal that I carried on my chest was the heaviest burden that I ever carried. And it didn't dissuade me. And I don't want to say that it empowered me or emboldened me, because, I was 24 years old. But I was dedicated to what it was that I was going to do. There was no plan B. This was it. This is what I had been called to do. This was my purpose, and this was the profession I was going to serve. So when I walked in that morning, I remember it clear as day. There was a guy that I worked with later. His father was the sergeant that handed me the Black Morning Band. Gordon Davis is his name. He was sitting right next to Sergeant Larry Hess, and I will never forget this day. It was a hell of a thing, but I wasn't dissuaded. I didn't feel like, hero mode or God mode. I was very well aware of the bad things that could happen. But yeah, I was committed. Yeah,
I like I said, I was still in college at the time, but I had recently made the decision. A good friend of mine, he actually graduated a little bit ahead of me. He had made the decision to go to Florida Highway Patrol is where he started his career, and he's now at a large sheriff's office in Southwest Florida, is what we'll say, since that's how we like to refer to our agencies, not specificity. But I remember us talking about this event that occurred, and it didn't dissuade us from what we wanted to do. I think, if anything, let us know that it was for real, and we were going to have to actually prepare and train, and made us just think about that. And since this occurred before I went through my initial academy training, I'll say it made me focus even more on the things that I was about to learn, so that when I went there, again, take it seriously. It's not a game, and definitely a job that isn't for everybody. And I would say, the people who look at that and they're like, hey, I'm out, it's probably a good thing. They probably shouldn't have signed up in the first place.
To that point, I actually spoke about this yesterday. I think people, when they come to the doors of the police academy and they go through the training and do all of these things, whatever their mindset is and whatever they believe this is going to be, you really don't know what it's going to be until you start doing it. I mean, we can see all the TV shows from the good to the bad. We can pay attention to all of that stuff, but we really don't know what that's going to be. I had this conversation 23 years ago with somebody who's going to law enforcement and doing the whole, this is going to be great, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, all these wonderful things. And I said, when you're in the academy and you open the book and you get to the part where, arson investigation, is there a scratch and sniff section in there that you can scratch on and say, burnt body? No. You have all the ideas and you have all the theory, and I will never say, when you get to the road, forget all that shit you learned, because that's ridiculous. Don't do that, because you're discounting everything that they've been taught the previous 6 months or whatever. But you have all these ideas, but you don't know what it's going to be until you have experienced it. So you may think it's cool. You may think that this is something that you're going to be able to withstand or manage, but you don't truly know until you're there. So I would ask you, here in Florida, somebody dies in a trailer 5 days ago. There's no air conditioning, and it's July. With words, explain to me what it smells like and what it feels like to have a body explode on your pants.
There are no words.
Exactly. Or when somebody takes a push dagger and stabs themselves in the carotid and walks around the trailer, and you can actually smell the iron in the air when you walk into the trailer. Did I, even though that I just went that descriptive, Did you get a good feeling of what that smell is? That you can actually taste pennies in your mouth?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what that is, but some kid coming out of the academy doesn't know until they know.
Right.
So with all that said, if you get to that point and you realize that, hey, this is your limit, and you raise your hand and say, look, man, I've been on this road for 6, 8, 9, 10 months, 5 years into this profession, and I've given it the good old college try, but this is not what I believed it was going to be, and you tap out. Actually, I hate to say that. Tap out makes it sound like a bad thing.
I was going to say, when I said it was a good thing, I know that some people probably initially listened to that and thought that I thought less of the, I meant actually it's a good thing.
No, I know what you meant, and I wanted to hammer down on that, because to be able to raise your hand and say, hey, this is my limit in a profession or disciplines that generally rate you based on your strength and your resolve and all the other words, that the tough guys want to use. But if you could say, hey, man, I've reached my limit. This is it. I've experienced what I wanted to experience, and I'm done. Thank you for your time. Bro, that takes more character to do that and more courage to do that than it does to gut it out, knowing that you're broken and you're on fire.
Yeah, it's similar to the courage it takes to reach out for help. And I'm going to reference back to my time in the training division, and I've watched both. I've watched people who have taken the responsible decision and been self-aware and known that it's not for them, made the decision to end their training and step aside. And I've watched people that, sounds bad for my judgment, but I have no business being in the profession, and they don't. You can make minimum standards and make it through a training. I'm so proud of the individuals, and I respect them so much for their courage to say, hey, this is not the job for me. I'm going to go to a place where I'm better suited to be. It's such a strong thing for those people to do, and strong, responsible, and they know that if they stayed around, there was a potential that they were going to put somebody else in danger because they weren't meant to be there, and they weren't going to be all in on that. So I hope that didn't sound when I first said it.
No, I took it in context. But let me put this before you go to the next sticky. You and I are sitting here having this conversation as mature, seasoned leaders who have 50 years of lived experience in that profession combined. What happens with their classmates? They're sitting around having this conversation in the break room. What are those people saying? I guarantee they're not having this conversation.
Well, if there's a good training sergeant around, maybe he'll go into the class and explain that. What just happened and why it's a good thing.
I think next time we're going to talk about leadership and moral courage.
I like the idea of that.
Yeah, no, me too. It's one of the things we've been circling lately. Anyway.
Always. It's a topic always. It's a topic of everything.
To the next sticky.
Everything's about leadership, right?
Absolutely. Starts and ends there.
So the next thing that I stickied and underlined here in the book.
You and your damn silly pen. Is this one in red ink?
This is red. I did all this stuff in red, yeah.
Damn you.
That's why I have different colors, man.
It makes me feel like it's a negative feeling.
Oh, no. It's just I wanted to be able to see it well. This is the part of the book where you're talking about your service in the Air Force and in the command that you worked in there. And I love this part. Rank existed only to remind the Defense Finance and Accounting Service what we got paid on the 1st and 15th. Everyone contributed and was relied upon for their strength. Shortfalls were shored up with training and mentorship. So that's your, cover and move basically is what that is going on. Stole that from Jocko, of course, but he puts it out there for free for us, so it's okay. He wants everybody.
I'll say, damn it, am I going to have to pay for that?
Yeah. He wants everybody to use it. I just got to.
The fact that we're both wearing long sleeve Origin branded shirts
and a notification from Jocko Fuel just came through on my phone as well. So it's Jesus. They knew we were talking about him. This is the kind of thing that we need a little bit more of, I think, around the career field. There's things that you can learn from people who are junior, senior, all around, and this focus on, I've been here longer, I'm a higher rank, I know more than you, you have nothing to teach me.
Those are damaged, broken people. I'm going to say it for what it is, man. Those are... To assume that you know everything. And I'll tell you, in the context of where that story came from and the men and women I was working with then, and I shared a quick story, my interactions with two of those men here just recently. No one can even argue that they were the best of the best of the best, the things that they had accomplished and still accomplishing to this day. So if anyone had any right to say that they are not absolutely right, but correct in what we were doing at the time, it would have been them. But never, ever, and I hate to use absolutes, but never, ever Did they ever say something like that? Again, like I said in the book, if your part of the mission was to execute this block of the mission, you were in charge. Regardless of what your rank, your position was, you were put in charge of that. That was your piece of that pie, your share of the task, as it were. And when you sat back and you briefed it, you would tell people who were senior to you, this is what's going to go on, this is the plan. If it was good to go, they'd say, check, that's it. And they'd move to the next person in that part of the briefing. But if it wasn't, they would say, hey, have you thought about this? What about if we look at it from this aspect? And that's when they start adding their experience into the conversation. They don't say, well, when I was here, we did this. Not at all. That big of a culture shock coming back because the people I went back to work with and for, I was a known commodity to them. My sergeant at the time was a senior NCO at SOCCENT. So he was aware of who I was with, what we were doing, and what my capabilities were prior to and when I had come back. So I was given quite a long leash. Yeah. But, not all of my experiences post 9/11 were as good. I mean, I'd worked for some martinets and some real weak and small people. So, yeah. Anyway, I ran away with that one. Sorry.
No, it's good. It can't be overstated. You know, there's a group of professionals in a room, and you can learn from the most junior,
Absolutely.
And you can learn from the most senior, and everybody in between. And just having, get rid of your ego, man, and let people show you something,
Well,
even if it's not.
And don't double down.
Yeah.
If you get wrong, own it. Because if you double down, you just look like a douche, and they're going to punish you for it.
Yeah.
And you should be.
It's hilarious because everybody knows, and so you try to cover it up, and it's just not worth it. Don't do it.
Own it. Get rid of it. Let it ride.
All right, man. I'm going down to the next page. This is I've had this question for a while. I want to ask it here though.
Dude, did you really circle it and say this?
What? No, no. It says what is this?
Okay.
So I want to know because Zubal it definitely creates an issue for you. So I got to know, what the heck is Zubal, man?
Okay. So Zubal is what we call it. When we'd go PT, we would either go run. The runners would run, and the big beefy boys, we would go to the gym and we'd lift. I liked to lift. I didn't like to run, even though I had to do that. So we would mix in our cardio, and we would play Zubal. Now, Zubal is played on a basketball court with a basketball. There is no dribbling. It's a cross between, it's unchained. Really, it's unhinged, unchained rugby on a hard basketball court carrying a round ball, and your goal is to make it to the opposite goal, like basketball, and make a basket. But if somebody's in your way, somebody's going to get hurt. So basically, there were no fouls, there were no free throws unless you were unconscious or bleeding. And if you called a foul, if you were bleeding or unconscious, then we had names to call you. And it wasn't sir or buddy or anything like that. So that was the case. A week prior, Chris had gotten trucked over and blew out his ACL. Anyway, he had to have surgery, so he was out. And then the following week, I trampled over one of our sailors. He got a nice concussion, which we know now is wholly unhealthy. And it sounded like a shotgun going off. And I was laying on the deck looking up, and Mike, the sailor, was kind of shaking the cobwebs a little bit. And everybody asked me if I was okay. And I'm like, yeah, my ankle hurts really bad. And they tried to pick me up, and I was like, no, don't touch me. So yeah, I had to hobble over and take a shower in the base gym and all that stuff. But yeah, Zubal, that's Zubal.
Zubal, outstanding.
Zubal is rugby with a basketball, and yeah, we weren't allowed to play Zubal because not with a knee surgery and then what turned out to be 2 ankle surgeries and a year of convalescing on a bad leg. Yeah, we weren't allowed to play Zubal anymore.
What? I've been in the Army Reserve for a couple of years, and one of the things that I have found, it seems like every time we do an alternate PT, whatever you want to call it, not the standard one, you can play football, play ultimate frisbee, play whatever it is that you're going to go play, there's somebody who always gets hurt.
Well, the problem is, and being an NCO yourself, you know that if you give Joe a lot of free time without adult supervision, shit's going to get broken. That's why there's weekend safety briefs that the sergeant major always wants to circle back on or piggyback off what the boss said. The 100 safe days of summer.
Yeah.
That's why we have to wear reflective belts at night with camouflage uniforms.
Oh, they keep you completely safe from everything.
Absolutely. So, yeah, when you let people that are high drive and silly go off and do stupid shit unsupervised, I have to say there were some E6s, and I think, no, the 7s were smart enough to stay away. But yeah, we did dumb shit, and that's what happens when we're unsupervised. We forget that we're not as pliable as we once were, probably.
I like how you said E7s were smarter guys.
Yeah, but actually the E7 that we had, and I'm going to give Wally a shout out. We've got plenty of stories about him. He actually smashed his talus bone. It's the bone in the ankle between the foot and the leg. Smashed it on a jump and continued to jump. And I forget the time frame. It was either 9 or 11 months after they put a big screw through the heel of his foot into his leg and fused his ankle that he finally medicaled out. I think he had gone to like Iraq and Afghanistan 2 or 3 times. Was on jump status still. And finally he was ordered to go do his medical out.
Of course.
Yeah, so sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That is not even a crazy Wally story.
And the competitive streak in the people in these teams has nothing to do with the way these injuries play themselves out, huh?
No, but yeah, yes, it does, absolutely. And the fact that we didn't get help, I mean, my ankle looked like a purple cartoon balloon, and I had it propped up on the garbage can later in the day, and the chief walked in, and first thing he saw was my huge cartoonish ankle, and asked what the doc had said. I said, I didn't see doc yet. And he was mad, but he wasn't surprised. And he goes, tomorrow morning, you're going to go see doc. That's before you come in here, you will see doc. And of course, it's broken. And
he didn't say, take a knee and drink some water.
No. He just looked at me and shook his head. He goes, no more zoo ball, and left the office. And, we all kind of giggled and all that stuff. But I went to go see the doctor the next day, and he goes, yeah, it's broken, and I'll have to get an MRI, but it looks like you may have torn some of the ligaments too. So we're going to have to cast it. And I said, no, a walking boot. Let's do a walking boot. And we did that. He just looked at me like I was crazy, but we had our own clinic at the command. We didn't go to the hospital. It was our docs and our corpsmen that took care of us. And it was a walking boot for 6 weeks. And they're like, yeah, bro, as Jocko says, Wolverine blood. I didn't have Wolverine blood. So, we had to do surgery. Yeah. No, we're not bright. Competitive, yes, not bright.
The other part I highlighted here, that you wrote in here, this single game of zoo ball would begin nearly a year of surgeries and healing, and then that was one event, one decision to play a game one time, and it caused the trajectory of your military career to change, and ultimately probably the trajectory of life to change.
You're only saying that because you know the story.
Yeah, because of the way you viewed it, which is the thing that I have highlighted here on the next page. You wrote this down, and this is where the beginning of that whole beating yourself up over something that wasn't your fault, you weren't responsible for. For years you run the book. For years I never said a thing to anyone because I was so ashamed and felt guilty that I was not there when it counted. That what I believed was my purpose on this planet had not been fulfilled. You created a narrative of what you were supposed to do, not understanding that everything in our life happens for a reason and guides us on a path that some of it we're in control of, some of the decisions. We make decisions and then things happen, and then that path takes us to a place, which we're going to get there in the book. But this is the beginning there of you're kind of beating yourself up for something that you failed at, but you hadn't. And it comes later. But I think later you realize that your team didn't think that way. You thought that way, but your team didn't think that way. And we're gonna get to that as we go farther back. But in that moment, where were you at in that moment?
I don't even know, honestly. That was a 16-year-old belief. A belief that I carried for 16 years, and I know the trajectory it led me on. And if you get the book, and which I hope you get the book and read, but explain it very clearly in the book that when I was raised, I was in a very patriotic household, a household that believed in service, and I believed my purpose was to be there with those guys and do the job with them. And the fact that I broke my ankle and I was relegated not to doing what I could with a cast on my leg, country clearances and packing weapons and helping plan, which turned out later to be strong suits and suit me. So yes, there was value there, but there wasn't at the time. I missed my chance to go down range with the greatest men that I will have ever been associated with. That had such an impact on me, and it's something that I've just started coming to understand. People ask me, how come the things that I accomplished, and what was a very extensive career over the course of 31 years, they asked me, why was it never enough? What hole were you trying to fill? And it wasn't until recently that I actually heard this Dr. Chris Free speaking about it on a Cleared Hot podcast with Andy Stumpf. And he talked about the ambition of shame. And I didn't think anything about it until I heard it the first time. And my friend Tyler Huckett, Polestar Coffee, Tyler Huckett brought up, and he says, man, this sounds a lot like that. And I dismissed it then, and just last week. And today, actually, my episode that I did with Dr. Free, talking about his book Operator Syndrome, I brought it up again. And it occurred to me when I was doing this episode with him just last week that that is is very likely what drove me as hard as I drove, to go as far as I did, to think that I can outrun all of the things that were happening to me physiologically, believing then, it's just a matter of toughness and keep going. Things are always going to be better at the next rank or the next assignment, or if I can just accomplish this or do this class, it's going to make me better than, and that'll make me happy. And that was never the case. I was trying to prove to myself and to everyone else that I deserved the company that I kept in that snapshot of my life. And yeah, that's what it was, man. It was never enough, because I was trying to bury the shame that I felt having been physically broken and not be able to do what I believed was my share of the task. That's what it was.
Probably didn't realize at the time how important it was, all the things that you were doing because of that injury, and the things that you were getting ready for the team, and the things that you were preparing for the team. And there's a lot of guys, tier 1 guys, that'll talk about this, and I love that they acknowledge the fact that they couldn't do what they do without all of the people that prepare everything they need, get everything they need into place, get them transported where they need to go, and get them on the X so they can conduct their missions. There's so many pieces that go into play to make those things happen. The operators are just one piece of that. And I think that a lot of the people in the support structure, they forget that those operators can't do their mission at all without the support structure being there.
Yeah, you need the spear to have a tip of the spear. Yeah. So I understand that, but I was young and short-sighted. I wanted to be there to support them. I mean, still in contact with those guys today.
And that's a beautiful thing, is you did that. You did support those guys.
I did, but I never saw it in quite that light, because it wasn't the job that I thought I was there to do. And and you read the book, and you've heard me on the podcast. I've had conversations, and of course you know the story. I've called the guys that I'm still very close with, and they knew all along how I felt. They were just waiting for me to call and have that conversation. And every one of them were complete gentlemen, as I would have expected them to be. And they told me all of the things that I did for them that I didn't see. And I'm not going to get into that stuff, because those are conversations with me and my teammates. But
and again, that's part of the everything happening for a reason.
No, it is.
And the plan all comes together in the end. And again, I mean, I'll say this book doesn't occur without that happening.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. My story certainly wouldn't be as rich as it is without those guys.
Mm-hmm. And all of the things along the way, and I'm thankful for, our friendship is probably part of that, right? That's part of the journey that we both had here, without the things that both of us have gone through.
Well, that is true.
Thankful for all that stuff. I'm not an EOD guy, so I get to the point in the book here where you're going through the EOD stuff. I did circle your motto, initial success or total failure. Unfortunately, that's, while it applies in EOD, like a lot of us apply that to our lives. Like if we don't succeed right in the beginning, we're like, I suck. This is all messed up. Feel like we have to start all over, and I got to leave and start something new. I can't. I'm all screwed up here. But I did circle that as something that too many of us, and myself included, have applied to life, instead of just saying, hey, I made a mistake and let's fix this and move forward, letting it drag us down a little bit farther. So it's interesting that that's in there.
Yeah, fortunately for, it holds true in the rules of explosives, but not, and when you're touching them, but not necessarily. I think the actual opposite is true in life. If you fail the first time, as long as you fall forward, you can recover. I mean, those make great stories. They are learning lessons and things that we move from. I mean, and the old adage, you're not starting over from the beginning, you're starting from a place of experience. Mm-hmm. And we're richer for all of those things. My God, I've got 208 pages full of of second chances.
You do. There's a couple things in here about the EOD experience, and I just wanted to flesh them out so that people understand them, because I don't, right? So I had a question, and I'm tired of being the guy who doesn't ask a question and clarify this as I read. I wanted to, so that everybody else, as they read the book, they get this. So I think I know what it means here. You write in here that you made the long walk on dozens of calls. Can you describe what's the long walk, and what's the significance of that?
The long walk is, I don't want to give away tactics and training and procedure, but when you find a suspected explosive device, you set up a perimeter around it a certain distance. whatever it is on your local protocols. And the only person inside of that area is the bomb technician going down to exploit the package or whatever item's been left. A lot of the times we do it with the robot. The robot only does so much, or at least at that time. Robot technology is fantastic now, but at the time, it always required afterwards a bomb tech to go down in a suit to fully, disassemble, separate, analyze, and render safe the things that are left behind, the energetic materials or the components, whatever the case may have been. And in that, you have whatever that standoff or that perimeter distance is with just you inside this 120-pound suit with no air conditioning and just your thoughts going through your tactics, your procedures, all of these things, knowing that you're getting ready to squat over something that someone left behind potentially to kill you and others. People will that have been in that position, it's very reflective. It's very quiet. All you hear is the fan going off in the back of your helmet. It's the long walk. It's just you and this device that's been left to maim, kill you or others. And I don't know, man. This sounds weird, and I know any bomb tech, public safety bomb tech or bomb technician who's ever done the long walk can probably relate to this, but it's a very peaceful experience. I found it's a very peaceful experience. So that's the long walk.
I can only imagine the stress of that and the courage it has to take to go down there. This is the epitome of no one's coming. Like, you're down there by yourself. You're going to have to do what you got to do down there.
You know what? The only thing in my mind was when I was doing that, I was like, this is the most fucking rock and roll thing ever. We said about this on a previous podcast. I never feared a bad guy, never feared a call, and it's probably lack of good sense in a lot of those occasions. Yeah. But I never really gave it that thought. I was going down on a package, and for me, it was any live device was how I treated any package or any problem in training. There was no possibility. Everything was going to be a win. I was going to win, and that was my mindset. So I really never considered that shit. I really didn't.
Yeah. I just, the way I look at it, it goes in the category of the list of jobs that I don't want to do, and that I'm glad other people are willing to step up and do them, because bombs go off. And we talked about this before. When a bomb goes off, there's no mitigation. There's a kill radius to that bomb, and if you're within that kill radius,
unless you're Mel Gibson, you can outrun it.
Well, and I recently started
wires.
I recently started watching the Reacher series. Also, he can survive massive explosions as well.
He can bench press explosions. Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
That's a good show. Quick bombs side note: we had a white powder call years and years and years ago. That's when white powder calls were still being done, and we were at a training day, and we'd all just sat down to lunch, and somebody on the east side of the county called for the bomb squad because they found a white powder. So we're paying the bill, and somebody comes on the radio and says, "Go ahead and cancel bomb team." And we all kind of looked at each other like, "We're all here, man. We can be there in 10 minutes." And the bomb squad commander got on the radio and asked them to repeat that. And dude comes back on the radio and says, "Yeah, cancel the bomb team." And Pete, I'm not even making this up, bro. They said, "Yeah, cancel the bomb team. It doesn't taste like anthrax."
What does anthrax taste like?
Yeah, that wasn't even my first question. That was question 5 or 6.
That's definitely.
But yeah. So apparently, the person who decided to test the anthrax, which was probably a laundry detergent sampler that busted open in somebody's mailbox, because, anyway,
they straight up did the Miami Vice.
That's exactly it. Let me go ahead and rub this on my gums like Sonny Crockett. Good thing it wasn't fentanyl, dick. Anyway, I'm sorry. Don't give away the whole book, man, because
I'm not giving away the whole book.
They need the whole context of this, man. I know what it is. You're testing me to see if I had a ghostwriter.
No, not at all.
We both know I didn't. But go ahead.
All right, this next part, I got here. I underlined this piece. The devil feeds on whatever bit of good is left within you and takes a piece of your soul with it. Call it the devil, call it whatever you want to. And what I wrote down my note here, that how many of our brothers and sisters were exposed to this at exactly the wrong time. How many people were at the depths of everything. Their cup was completely full. And who knows what time of day it is or what time of night it is, and the devil comes for you. And call it whatever you want to. A non-religious person is going to use a different terminology. Your demons come for you, whatever it might be.
You call it whatever you want. You know when you've met the devil. I don't care what you call the devil. You know when you've met that person. It is unmistakable, and I can tell you in great detail every time I did. And I can assure you they leave with a piece of you.
And this is where what I'm going to go back to. When this happens, this is the 3 a.m. phone call. And I think I have another piece in here about the 3 a.m. phone call. This is where we've got to make it safe, and we've got to make sure that people have somebody that they can make the 3 a.m. phone call to. Because that's just what I wrote. How many people has that happen at exactly the wrong time? And how many of those people, if they could have picked up the phone and talked to somebody, wouldn't have made that decision?
We'll never know the answer to that.
Correct. We won't. But it just struck me when I was reading the book and going through there. So that's one of the things that hit me that we need to pay attention to is those times, and making sure that people understand that that's going to come at some point in time in your career. I don't think it's escapable for the most part. If you're out here doing this job and you're doing it for a career, I don't think you're going to escape that. The demon, the devil, whatever it is.
No, you won't.
You just have to be able to be prepared to deal with it when it comes.
Yep.
And make sure that you have your resources lined up. One of the next things I came to, I just underlined this one sentence here. I could not rationalize a reason for this tragedy. It's at the end of one of your vignettes of a particularly horrible thing that occurred. And the note that I wrote next to this is just, this helpless feeling is such a horrible pain to endure. And in the moment, from reading the book, I kind of saw how you went through this and kind of how you got through it afterwards. But it's one of these things that looking for the answers. And what are your thoughts on when a guy gets or a girl gets to the point where they're a witness to that senseless tragedy through the line of duty? They're responding to the senseless tragedy, and they're searching for the why. Why do things like this happen? The ultimate why. Like, what are your thoughts on where they should go and how they should handle that?
Well, I can tell you how I handled it. I was very, very good at compartmentalizing and just moving to the next one, which we know is wholly unhealthy. And again, not a clinician. I'm just basing this off of my experience and the things that I believe that I could have done better. I think in all of these situations, you need to recognize it as an opportunity to either something to compartmentalize and move away from, or to sit with it and try to unravel it. There are some things that are going to happen that you just can't, there's no human rationale for it. And a lot of people will use, and I think they over-rely on the phrase, it is what it is. Well, for me, when I've discussed this with you and others, that's a non-answer, but it applies in those situations that don't have a human rationale for it. You know, there was a weekend that I had, the worst weekend that I had ever had strung together, and they're in the book, that I couldn't understand why these things had to happen. I don't know, man. I tell you, I just kept moving, and that was the wrong thing to do. So if I were to go back and do things differently, I would speak to someone. I would find help, or I would at least, at the very minimum, journal it, just to, again, see what it was that I really believe about this. A lot of the vignettes in here are things that I had never put words to until I started journaling, or put the journal aside and started hiding in plain sight. Hiding in plain sight is the thoughts that I have based on my journey in my journal.
Yeah, I got to end one of these, and what I wrote as my note in here, just based on some of the things that you wrote in the vignette, I just wrote down, we are ready to be someone else's 3 a.m. call, but terrified to make that call ourselves. Demons don't come for you in the light of day. They wait for the dark when you're alone and most vulnerable. So one of the questions I have, and as we go through these, is how do we help make sure that we can build the ability to make the 3 a.m. call and establish those relationships?
Well, you just said it right there. That's the answer, establishing relationships. I think we talked about it at Cozy Coffee, that it's important to be able to build a trust with somebody, that they're going to be able to come to you or reach out to you, and that you're going to answer that phone, or to be able to help them get to the resources that they need. You don't have to be the clinician. You're not. You don't have the capacity for that because you're dealing with your own life and stuff. But to be there to at least listen, I think it's important. But to start that, you have to build that relationship, and you have to be trustworthy. And we talked about that at the Cozy Coffee. You have to have a safe environment for people around you to believe that you are mean what you say, and you're there to help them and to get them to where they're going. That all starts with culture, and I think that I spoke about this yesterday on an episode that I did. I would like to think that it's going to come from above, from leadership. And to a great degree, it probably could, because of the size of your agency will enable that, or at least foster that. But I think in larger agencies and maybe first responder disciplines at large, I think it's going to be a groundswell of people doing the job that are finally going to stop and say, look, we all need to talk about this. And I think it's going to be a deafening roar when it happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, the note I made in the book as I was reading here is there's real fear for speaking up when trauma has affected us. We think about whether we're going to be accepted by the tribe, right? If we speak about it.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to cut the book short, and I'm going to make you go into the back, because I'm going to talk about something here that I wanted to talk about probably the last 3 times we've spoken. And it's about exactly like that, the culture. And I was asked on one of the episodes that I did, and it was actually the first episode that I did on Alone and Unafraid, the first podcast that I was a part of, where we started unwrapping some of this stuff. It was I think it was Thad that asked me, Thad King of Alone and Unafraid asked me, if you had raised your hand and said that this was what was wrong, do you think that you would have been taken care of? And of course, I had a lot of grace then, and oh yeah, absolutely. No, I didn't raise my hand. I didn't ask for help. But the further I get into this, and the more comfortable I get talking about my story and all of these things, and actually to a large degree, what you said one of the last times we met was 2 things can be true at the same time. I recall going to the supervisor assessment center when I tested for lieutenant. And we had to go there, and you're familiar with the assessment center, and it's an inbox exercise, and you have to be a random PIO, and they ask you questions, and then you go into counsel of troop. And I wanted to bring up this thing in it, and I was reminded of it just recently when I thought to myself, then was the culture existent for me to have raised my hand and said something, and I would have gotten the help. And I said, I would like to believe so. However, here is an example that I probably refer to subconsciously at the time. But during that time, in that assessment center, we had a troubled troop that was normally a high performer, but had been slipping at work. Their performance had slipped up a little bit. They were showing up late to work. They weren't as active as they normally did. Their reports were slacking, or lacking, I should say. And here's the base information you have, and you've been asked by the sergeant to counsel this troop and start the performance improvement process, the PIP program. Counsel them and basically write them up and put them on notice. So I walk in there, and there were 2 majors in there along with this deputy who was the role player. The 2 majors that were in there were the evaluators. So I sat down and I talked to this young deputy, and I said, hey, I've had a conversation with your sergeant, and I know that this is your work product. You're normally super deputy and blah, 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 and these things have been found lacking. But I don't want to talk to you about that. I was being genuine, Doug, and keep in mind, this was now early 2018. I was well aware that I was experiencing something. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what was going on. I'd been having the conversations of it's okay not to be okay with my squads and all that stuff. So I was aware that there could be other things other than, hey, you don't want to do a traffic stop today. So I literally physically moved the papers aside, and I said, I want to talk about other things. What's going on at home? Are things going well with your partner, your girlfriend or your boyfriend? Everything going okay with the family, with the kids? And, she said, well, I don't have kids, and I recently broke up with my boyfriend, and he moved out, and this, and I'm having trouble sleeping because of midnights, because of these things. And, it wasn't written into the script, and it probably was part of her script, if they go this direction, say these things, whatever the case is. But we had a dialogue back and forth, and I said, look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get you reassigned to the desk for the next couple of weeks, okay, to get you off of patrol, not to worry about numbers or stats or going on calls or any of this stuff. We're going to put you there, and we're going to get you desk trained, okay? Because, as a young deputy, or even as a senior deputy, there's things that desk deputies do, mitigating problems, calls coming in. They learn quite a bit about the running of a squad.
Absolutely.
Junior corporals and sergeants, I believe, because they handle a wide variety of things. So it's like, okay, there's benefit. We'll have some backup to the desk deputy. We'll put you there, give you some time to decompress. And here's the number to the EAP. And I actually had it in my phone because I was a supervisor at the time, and I wanted to have it readily available in case somebody came to me. I said, I want you to take your time, find somebody to talk to if that's what you want to do. We're going to change your hours a little bit, a little less stress, put you on the desk, do these things, and we'll revisit this thing in a few weeks. How's that sound? Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much. Blah, 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 blah. I said, I'll tell your sergeant, hey, we're doing these things. This is between you and I. This is the route we're going to go. Give you some time to decompress, and then we'll move forward. Everything was good to go. And time. One of the majors came right out of the gates and said, well, how come you didn't counsel them? I don't understand. Well, you didn't talk about the work product and what you were going to do to strengthen the work product. And I'm thinking that's exactly what I did. And the other major was fantastic. He said, no, that was fantastic. Nobody's done that. They go right to the behavior. This is what's presenting. They don't look beyond that. So the two were split. One of them rated me horribly based on their perception of what had transpired, and the other one rated me favorably. In fact, there was more conversation apparently after I left the room, because the second major pulled me aside after it was announced that I had been promoted, that he was fighting to get me to come to his district specifically for the things that I had said and the things that I had done in that room. Wasn't outwardly critical of what the other major had said, but was very clear that this was their feelings. They didn't think I should be a lieutenant because I wasn't correcting the behavior or enforcing a standard. So thinking about that, and then going fast forward in the book and my own experiences and how my career ended, do I believe 19, had I raised my hand? And be clear, I could have, but I did not. For whatever reason, I did not. I don't know for sure, so this is all speculation. But if I were to use a single example of what the culture was at that time, I would say no. It was not a safe environment to have done that. Is it now? I've been gone from my agency for right at a year and a half, just shy of, I think. Yeah, just shy of a year and a half. Has it changed? Well, I would say the feedback that I'm getting from around the country and even from my own former organization about the impact of hiding in plain sight, I'd have to say there's still some work to be done.
There's a lot, but what I will say is there are pockets of positive things that are happening. There are pockets of places.
Well, it's a groundswell. It's going to happen.
There are platoons, there are squads, there are districts out there where the leaders are getting it right. And the point I wanted to make of what you just described, you just so accurately described the difference between a manager and a leader.
No, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And that's the big difference.
Moral courage.
Two things I wanted to bring up more from this book. There's two lines in this book that they repeat themselves. One of them is, I never spoke of this to anyone. Mm-hmm. And the other one is, this made me feel like a pussy. Not just from your description of how things made you feel, but people coming and talking to you and telling you that they were afraid because that's how it made them feel. And again, my opinion is that those are two of the things also that we need to work on getting into a better place. We need to create that safe environment, that place where there's people, where there's leaders that are accepting what people have to say. And so that folks are, number one, not scared to say something. So that we need to reduce this whole, I never spoke of this. I hope and pray that 20 years from now, guys aren't saying I never spoke of this to anyone after things happen. And that number two, they're not self-deprecating them saying this made me feel this way, or having this thought or feeling made me feel this way. And then I want everybody to...
I want to comment on that real quick if I can. Actually, I want to get my thoughts together, so there's going to be a long pause.
I could just monologue about something else.
No, because you're going to distract me. So what I would say to that is, somebody will say, if I say something, what happens if my career ends? So I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound flippant, because I've never made a secret about this. I was not strong enough to stand up myself and say, I've had enough, or I need help. I wasn't. If you read the book and if you heard me on previous podcasts, you know what the catalyst was. So for me to sit there and say something like, but if I say this, my career might end. So, and again, that sounds, and I'll probably get torn up for it because I wasn't strong enough to do it, and I'd be hypocritical to say that, because I understand this is the thing that you wanted to do, what you feel like you were called for. You've been told this is the only thing you're good at, or you're lucky to have this organization in your life, all of the toxic shit. But you know what? If you were faced with sitting in a parking lot with a pistol in your hand versus having to get a job in business or corporate America, let me tell you something. There's a choice. There's a choice. And it's to get a job in corporate America. I mean, it just, you are so much more than what they'll have you believe. You are so much more than a badge or a shirt. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that until it's too late, or until they have to give the shirt back on their last day and realize that all that admiration was all rented anyway. It didn't belong to you.
And the failing of the knowledge that the skills that you have learned throughout your career are not translatable into some other job field. They are. You just haven't done the work to figure that out.
Yeah, and hell, I mentioned a form number that a lady used 2 hours ago in a side conversation at the table next to us that is completely foreign to the law enforcement world, but very familiar in another section of the first responder community. I got offered a frickin' job. I hadn't had a grown-up job in a year and a half.
Turning the job down, Doug. Turning the job down.
Well, you might be. I'll talk to Michelle. She'll tell me the same thing.
So I want to wrap up our
Yes.
talk about the book and just say that going through the book, you see how many tabs I have. I'm sure this is audio, so nobody else can see.
You have a problem with tabbing. You may
how
want to
many
speak to
tabs
somebody
I have
about
in here,
that.
which is indicative of all of the awesome information in the book, all of the things that have had an effect. And again, as I read through this book, I told you before we started talking, and in the beginning, there's parts of this book that teared me up and choked me up, and it's got so much great information. I am so proud and honored to be here with you talking about this book, and just the courage that you had to put pen to paper and bring this stuff out and start bringing this stuff to the surface to help other people literally come out of hiding, right? To literally come out and step forward and say, I'm gonna reach out and I'm gonna get help. The last piece of the book, the last line I'm gonna read out of the book, and this is one that hit me the most emotionally, and I love this part, where you acknowledge, without Michelle and Faith, there is no happy ever after to this story. And that's towards the end of the book. Again, I'm so impressed by the journey that you've been on, and everything you've done along the journey, the way you handled yourself when things happened the way they happened at the office, the way you came out of that. We talked at your actual retirement party, about all that stuff and the opinion that the real men and women around the place had of you and have of you. So again, this is great work. It's awesome. I wish that everybody would come out and get their copy of Hiding in Plain Sight and read it and help themselves. It's great for first responders. It's great for first responder families. This isn't just a cop book. It's not just a soldier book. It's not any of those things. I think it's super helpful to everybody understanding the things that can happen to us and give us, the knowledge that, again, we're not alone, and stepping up and saying something about what's going on with you and seeking that help and that care for yourself is, again, it's the same thing as treating an illness or treating a broken limb. Go out there and get that help and don't hide, and read this book, and experience these wonderful stories in here. Some of them are traumatic, but going through them and reading them, and then seeing how you reacted and ultimately how you came through all of this. It's an inspiring story for everybody to be exposed to, and it's an example for them, and hopefully people read this and they get on that healing journey earlier rather than later, because I think that'll be super helpful to everybody.
I appreciate that, Pete. And for anybody still listening, I mean, the book has turned into several things since I wrote it, and I've discussed that on other platforms, but I've gotten fantastic response from brand new recruits to spouses, to tier 1 operators, to people who teach in the police academies. This thing has turned into something bigger than I thought it ever would. And I don't know that I had a choice in the matter. I saw what I had and saw what had been done, and knew that, whether it was needed in the space or whether I needed to be in the space to bring this message forward, I knew that this story was doing no one else any good stuck inside of me. So for anything else, the success here was just writing and publishing this. I mean, the podcast and what it's doing. Additionally, this is all, I'm just very grateful and very humbled by what this is doing. I appreciate everybody's support. I appreciate you being on this journey with me. I remember actually sitting in here and I pitched this to you. We were at 22nd Street Coffee, and your response was, I thought it was just me. So thank you for being my co-pilot on this. Michelle was certainly the navigator, but yeah, man, I'm very grateful. So thank you for everybody listening to Tell This Story, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tell This Story. Pete and I had a great time and several cups of cafe con leche during the recording of this episode. If you'd like to connect with Pete, you can find him on LinkedIn under Peter Paul. Once again, a huge thank you to Polestar Coffee for sponsoring this episode. Fuel your mission with the best blends. Visit polestarcoffee.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Every rating helps us continue sharing these important stories. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's to share your feedback, suggest guests, or tell us about the topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in to Tell This Story, and remember, there's always a way forward. We'll see you next time.